Okay, guys, I said I was going to wait for Daniel to put together his video on falling birth rates in Canada. I mean, it's literally happening across the globe, but focus on Canada in particularly. So we're going to be talking about the birth rates and how they're falling because of the housing crisis in Canada. If you don't recognize me yet, my name's Alex. I run an AI agency in Toronto, and we've been following the conversation around economy, population, jobs in Canada for some time now, and it's only been in the past few months where it's really started to pick up for us. We're getting a lot more likes, subscribers. If you like what you're hearing here, like the types of conversation, hit like and subscribe. If you don't like it, you can just dislike, leave a comment, let us know. We're going to do a round of all the comments at the end of the year. But I really appreciate Daniel's due diligence when it comes to research. I'm pretty big on accurate research. A lot of the content we put together has to be thoroughly researched by AI, checked. So we appreciate when hard facts are being delivered in YouTube videos from Canadian content creators, just because it shows like, hey, we're actually looking at reality here instead of just talking out our asses sometimes on YouTube. I know I do that sometimes. So we're going to get into that, but I want you, if you're watching this today, I want you to understand like we look at the transformation of Canada through the lens of technology and AI. And we're always encouraging Canadians to go to ChatGPT, try and figure out how AI can help you. If you want to get into the AI business or the AI industry, feel free to schedule a discovery call with our team. We got plenty of stuff to do. But for me, like population growth, building families, that's super important to a healthy economy, especially one that economies hinge so heavily on real estate in Canada, and we're just not doing it anymore. So for our real estate industry, that's devastating. We're not building enough family units to come together, put down payments on houses, and the sentiment behind housing prices or housing values is literally deteriorating. So we got a big problem. We don't have new people coming in to you know fill up these houses, and a lot of the people who need housing values to stay high or even increase, like elderly generations, they're watching their retirements whittle away. So we're going to get into it with Daniel. And, I got to say, like, these videos are really educating me. So I hope you guys have at least something to take away from it. Let's get into it.
Birth rate has been on a downward slide for decades, but it has now reached uncharted lows. And one new economist research may help to explain why. A surprising culprit might be the cost of housing. Canada's total fertility rate, or TFR, fell to 1.25 children per woman, the lowest ever recorded. For context, a TFR of about 2.1 is needed to maintain a stable population. And this is
So TFR is fertility rate, guys. Just to keep that in mind, it's just a denomination of a rate of births per certain number of people, particularly women. And we're just trying to see what that number is. Generally, in the past, you have that number as a certain threshold. The population is increasing. If it's below that number, the population is decreasing.
also known as the replacement rate or replacement level. Canada is now well below that replacement level, meaning Canadians are having fewer babies than ever before. But an important question is, why is this happening? According to fresh research by economist Benjamin Couillard from University of Toronto, rising housing costs are responsible for roughly 11% fewer children and about 51% of the fertility rate decline between the 2000s and 2010s.
Wow.
In simple terms, the cost of living, especially expensive housing, and the lack of affordable family-sized homes appears to be discouraging Canadians and other people in wealthy countries from having as many kids as they might otherwise have had. Canada's birth rate has been on a downward slide for decades, but it has now reached uncharted low. The decline set in after the late 20th century baby boom and accelerated in recent years. In fact, the 5 lowest fertility rates ever recorded in Canada all occurred in the last 5 years, according
Wow.
to Statistics Canada. The
So,
TFR
so you got to take that in. Literally, the lowest 5 years of births in Canada, guys, was the last 5 years. So I'm going to point to my own age group, millennials. We're just not having kids, and I personally, have reasons for that. Like you guys, if you know anything about me and my personal life, like bringing someone into the world or bringing someone into a world of difficulty is not something I'd advise. Just having kids just because you want to hold a baby and you want to bounce it on your knee, not a very good reason. We literally have to be clinical now with our own reproduction in this country just because of how difficult it is. We have to plan everything. We have to plan our our relationships, and that removes the spontaneity from it. And then we remove the spontaneity from it. All of a sudden, we're not having good times anymore. Good times aren't leading to people having babies, and then population decreases. So it's like when things were going really really good, no one cares about this stuff. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm having a kid, I'm having a baby, I'm a second, third baby, yada, yada, yada. That's what our parents got to experience. For millennials, if you're in a position where you can have children, congratulations, you did it. You beat the game of life. You got to have kids. But it's it's hard for the average Canadian to look at their 9 to 5, and they're maybe 60, $70,000 Canadian that they're making a year, and turning around and looking at the housing market and saying, hey, you know what, I can't even afford rent in a lot of places in this country. And I'm very positive that raising a child in one of these small apartments is not advised. And especially like if you want to have a child with, a nurtured mind and, opportunities to grow. And you sort of want to have the house where they can run up and down the stairs, they can run into the backyard. There's a neighborhood around that's peaceful and safe for them to play in and sort of grow up in. These cookie cutter, what is it, dog gray condos? It's hard. It'll be hard to raise one child, two child, possible.
Was 1.47 in 2019 and now just 1.25 in 2024. Since 2009, the trend has been steadily downward, pushing Canada into the category of ultra low fertility nations,
Wow.
which is defined as a TFR below 1.3. By 2024, Canada at 1.25 joined countries like Switzerland, Luxembourg, Finland, Italy, Japan, and even Singapore at 0.97 and South Korea at 0.75 in this ultra low club. In other words, this isn't just a Canadian phenomenon. Birth rates are plummeting across the developed world. And global birth rates have fallen dramatically. The world's average birth rate dropped from about 5 children per woman in the 1960s to around 2.3 today.
Wow.
Canada's trend mirrors this global decline, recently hitting a record low. Within Canada, the decline has been widespread. In 2024, 9 out of every 10 provinces hit their lowest birth rates ever. For example, Ontario's TFR fell to 1.21 and British Columbia's to just 1.02,
Holy
which is
shit.
almost down to one child. At the same time, Canadians are having children later in life than previous generations. The average age at
Is
childbirth
that my
reached
mic or his mic?
31.8 years in
I think his mic.
2024, up from about 26.7 years in the mid 1970s. And these postponements mean less time to have household formation, become couples, try to have kids, which naturally translates to fewer children. And Canada has been below the replacement fertility level since 1971. But the drop has steepened recently. Even a brief uptick in 2021, the small pandemic rebound wasn't enough to reverse the overall slide that we're seeing in Canada. In short, Canada is experiencing a baby bust like
Crazy.
nothing we've seen before. Amid all
Guys, I personally never even heard that term. Like, how there's baby boomers? Are millennials and Gen Zs and I guess Gen Alpha, like Jesus Christ, all these names. Are we baby busters? It looks like it. It really looks like, and it's so funny because our parents, even my friends' parents, they ask me about my kids and ask me where are the kids. I've got a buddy I used to go visit his house all the time. His mother's really close. She's like, "Where are the babies? Where are your babies, Alex?" And I always tell her, "I don't know where they are right now." I was just joking, but um, it's funny because in their generation, the boomers are like, having kids is just part of the program. It's like, why don't you have kids yet? And it just goes to show just the mentalities of people in just one previous generation, maybe two for Gen Xers. Gen Xers probably seen it. Gen Xers are pretty quiet these days, but the boomers, so adamant about having children, they couldn't even conceive growing up and not having a child. It's like it's part of their world. So when they're looking at all these millennials aged 30s, 40s, some 45s, it's like, where are your kids? It's like, the you guys had the boom. The boom was for the baby boomers. Now we got all these people out here and very few resources, and we're scraping and clawing for pennies. It's hard to justify wanting to bring a kid into the world. Like my father, uh, um, I mean, I was conceived when my father was 48 years old. I'm 37 now. I was conceived when my father was 48. So for me, I'm not, I in my mind, I'm like, I still have 10 years to figure it out. And he's gone pretty far. He's like 85 now. So he's lived a pretty good life. He's been able to see me grow up and, become a man and start my own business, all that stuff. So he's fine. He has I have other sisters, they have babies, like he's got a full family, he's fine. So I'm not in a rush. My mother, on the other hand, she wants us to have kids ASAP, and it's like I have to sort of break it to her. It's like bringing a kid into the world now is extremely risky, and I'm risking putting that kid's life into a scenario where they're not going to be able to have all the opportunities that even I have, because I'm still working to build that for them. But it's this is just me and my example in my life. When you extend that across millions of other people, you get a birth rate decline. You literally get a birth rate decline. So Um, and it's not like I haven't had opportunities to have kids. Just like, you got to be smart out here. You got to play it safe, or else you might find yourself, committing for life to something that you might not be able to handle. So it's very important that we're paying attention to this stuff, guys, because what is the knock-on effect of a country literally missing a generation of children? We're missing a generation of workers. So as an AI person, I'm looking at the landscape going, hell, entry level roles for young people are being removed. At some point in time, there's going to be no young people, or there's going to be so few young people. It's just going to be the people that exist today in a world with machines and businesses. So we really got to pay attention. Learning about tech, learning about these trends is better for you than not learning about it and putting your head in the sand, because guys, this is starting to like affect us at a national level.
The worrying statistics, new research offers a fresh insight into why the birth rate is falling, and it points to housing affordability as a key piece of the puzzle. Economist Ben Couillard aptly titled his job market paper, Build Baby Build: How Housing Shapes Fertility. Using detailed models of housing and family choices, Couillard examined how the cost and availability of housing affect decisions about having children. His findings are striking. High housing costs have significantly discouraged family growth. Larger families, as it turns out, are much more sensitive to housing prices. They need bigger homes, more bedrooms, maybe a backyard, more income, more mouths to feed. So when housing becomes very expensive, people tend to delay or forego having additional kids. Couillard's
100%.
model, calibrated with US data, but with clear relevance for Canada's costly cities, indicates that rising housing costs since 1990 had led to 11% fewer children overall. In fact, he attributes about half of the total fertility rate decline between the 2000s and 2010s to the surge in housing prices. In other words, young people are getting priced out of wanting to have families. In practical terms,
That's
this means a
exactly right.
big part of the fertility slump can be explained by young couples being priced out of the homes that they'd have or they'd want if they had kids or had more kids. When rent and mortgages eat up income, people postpone having children or decide to have fewer. It's not just the direct cost of an extra bedroom. Expensive housing often goes hand in hand with higher living costs in general and economic uncertainty, which makes starting or expanding a family more daunting. Couillard's research offers a hopeful implication. Making housing more family friendly and affordable could help stem the birth rate decline that we're seeing in the Western world. And across much of the world, you even have countries like China and India who have recently fallen below the replacement rate.
Holy shit,
I'm
really?
not really of the perspective that this is this huge societal issue that a lot of people paint it as, but I do think that if you really just examine capitalism, it depends on more people and more dollars chasing goods in order to be sustained. And so this is why I think a lot of people do feel like the birth rate is this big risk issue for the future of capitalism, right? Basically, I think this is why a lot of Western economies are trying to grow their populations through immigration,
He's right.
because it's almost like a consequence of middle class life and capitalism and this like new scarcity of resources that you have this middle class all fighting for has created this world in which people want to have children less or
Damn, I'm getting scam phone calls on the daily. If you live in Canada and you're not getting daily scam phone calls, you're not trying hard enough. Let's continue.
feel less compelled to, or like they can't afford it, or it's not a necessary life step for them, or whatever it is. And that means that there are fewer people to consume goods, which means that the businesses that create and sell those goods have a scary future ahead of them. And so we've started backfilling that growth in a country with immigration in many places in the Western world, in much of Europe, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And so it really begs the question, why does the number of consumers or the amount of people consuming goods in a capitalist system have to continue growing? Like, why does your country's population need to continue growing? And people might point to places like Japan as an example, or Italy, where the Japanese population just fell by a record 900,000 people,
Wow.
the 16th straight year of decline.
That is
Or in places like
insane.
Italy, where the expectation is that their population will actually start to decline as well. But then you jump over to places like Italy or Japan. Let's use those as examples. In Japan, they have this concept called Akia, which is empty houses, right? So outside of urban areas, there are literally 9 million empty homes in Japan. You can get
Okay.
these for $0 or $1 or whatever, a couple $1,000s, and purchase them and fix them up and have a house. Not even that far from an urban area, and some of them are in nice locations, etc. Italy has a similar situation happening where you can literally buy a house for $1 in many places in Italy, because these municipalities are trying to give away basically real estate to attract people to these towns, old
My
villages that
God.
are basically dying off. They're emptying out because the population is either urbanizing or disappearing. How does this relate to Ben's research? His research suggests that increasing the supply of larger family suitable housing like townhouses and multi-bedroom units would yield substantially more additional births than the equivalent increase in small apartments.
Must have been really important to
You
have me
guys
come
hear
to the
that?
branch
Let's
today.
wait.
But what if it
Take in this
wasn't?
ad.
Maybe they don't value my time. Maybe I
Coinbase,
don't
guys.
value my time. And if I don't value my
Coinbase, AI platforms, they have me on lock. Literally, I'm dialed into to the technological world, be it digital money, digital workers. Like when you start to see your ads uh, turn into this type of context, pure technology, you're on your way.
But if you look at what we're building in Canada, we are building more apartments and other unit types that are not
Trash.
single family detached or ground based housing. And we're building a decreasing amount of single family detached houses. Our single family detached construction peaked here in about 2002, where our apartment style construction is still hitting new all time highs every day. Even in the US, the data
So we're
is
building the
pretty
wrong
similar.
shit.
You saw this huge decrease in single unit structures, so your detached or freehold houses, that we haven't really recovered since the global financial crisis in the US, and really haven't gotten back to those historic levels for all types of housing starts. And a lot of this is just because Canadians are urbanizing. As it stands right now, nearly 3 in 4 Canadians, or 74%, live in one of Canada's large urban centers. And this is a trend that is continuing across the world. more than 4 billion people, more than half of the world's population, live in urban areas, and this is expected to continue growing. And the rate at which people live in urban areas is the highest and increasing the most in upper middle income countries or high income countries. And so we're building our way into smaller units, denser living, just a different way of life. It's not necessarily to say that there's an issue with this. I have no judgment wrapped around the idea of it. It's just observing that this is actually what's happening.
So just to take that, I have a feeling this video is going to be ultra long, but just to take in the reality here that he's trying to point out, we're creating more dense living spaces where you're going to have more neighbors, not necessarily going to be a lot of families, just a lot of single adults living in dog crates in the major urban areas. And you know, when you're a kid and you're growing up and you think, oh, I'm gonna have a family, I'm gonna have a kids, I'm gonna be a picket fence, I'm gonna have a minivan, all that stuff. Because you're watching your parents do it, and you're watching your parents, able to buy all sorts of shit with their 9 to 5 jobs. You're thinking, hey, I'm gonna have the same thing. I'm sort of gonna live the same thing. I don't think anyone expected the inability of Canadians or just young adults in general to start families, have homes in modern day to be this difficult. It's like somewhere along the lines, like in this particular timeline, like someone flipped a switch and said, no more families, no more houses, no more jobs, all at once. And we're starting to see the fallout of that in Canada. In China, they are so far down this path, people have lost like 80, 90% of the value of their homes. The falling population, literally negative growth in China, where there's billions of people. It was somewhat. Eventually, we got to all wake up and say, something's going on here. We got to pay attention. So if you decide to pay attention and you decide that to say, I really want to make myself sturdy or more resilient or hardened to these new times, guys, we got to pick up technology. The people who come out of this are not going to be the people who are a great. Well, I actually know what, if you're good at chopping up wood and laying bricks, you're probably going to do pretty well. But on the other side of the spectrum, it's the people who can understand that these changes, these technological changes, hey, capitalism looks like it's having issues. It's going to have issues because we don't have a replacement rate for new people to feed the beast. So, man, it's going to get wild. We're creating an environment of just adults with no families. Crazy.
And because it's happening in 2007 here, you can see we eclipsed more people are living in urban areas than rural areas for the first time in history, a greater percentage of the total population. This would tell me that the market is communicating that it wants to live in urban areas. Otherwise, they just wouldn't do it. But we're now wondering, is this coming at a consequence of birth rates falling because of cost, because of housing, because of whatever it is? And Ben's research finds that building more large units could actually produce 2.3 times more births than building the same value of small units. And so his conclusion is that housing policy and housing affordability is population policy. If young families can find reasonably priced homes with space for kids, they're more likely to have the kids they say they want. I think most people would assume that this is the case, but it's really interesting to see it represented in data and modeled out by an economist. And while many factors are at play, as we're going to explore next, this research shines a light on housing affordability as a concrete lever that policymakers should target if they want populations to grow through birth rather than through immigration. In essence, this build, baby, build idea might be more than a catchy phrase. It should actually be a part of the solution to Canada's baby bust. Now, expensive housing is one piece of the puzzle, but falling birth rates have multiple causes. Demographers and economists point to a mix of economic, social, and cultural shifts that have reshaped childbearing decisions in Canada and other high income countries. Here are some of the major factors that are driving birth rates down, according to these demographers and economists. Number one is the high cost of raising children. Beyond housing, the overall cost of living is a significant deterrent. Modern parenthood comes with heavy expenses, from daycare and education to simply putting food on a growing family's table. And stagnant wages for young workers, expensive tuition, and the prospect of supporting a child into their 20s, which is the average age that somebody does stay at home or beyond, makes many couples think twice. And surveys show that financial stress is a top reason couples cite for having fewer kids. In short, when people feel economically insecure, they often postpone or limit their decision to grow their family. The next layer on this is
That is 100% true. Like when I was growing up in my early 20s, my parents like, oh, you got to get a girlfriend, you got to get married, you got to have kids. In my mind, I'm thinking, how the hell am I supposed to do all that with, $50,000, $60,000 a year? It was already starting to look impossible when I was in my 20s because of how expensive houses were. Like my parents were talking, my father's first apartment cost him $40,000 Canadian. I think the first home that my parents bought was like a couple $100,000. Like it just imagine a full on house just like 10 minutes out of downtown Toronto. Not 10 minutes, maybe like 20 minutes from downtown Toronto. Full huge house. That wasn't huge. It was like a medium sized house, but it had a backyard, a front yard, a driveway, all the things you need to have, all this shit for kids to do and stuff like that. A couple $100,000. Watching that house grow in value, get the retirement home, no problem. Like for them, it was just easy mode. They made one good decision and then ended up having a life to enjoy because of that. Now, if you're a young person, you have to make critically difficult decisions in succession to just survive. So, I personally don't, I'm not thinking, oh, I want to go. I actually scratch that. I think to myself, I want to have kids. Like every day I'm thinking that. And so my response to that is make more money, do more, produce more, chop tops and bottoms, make sure you're getting income in every day somehow, or building towards income for tomorrow, whatever you got to do. That's my drive. But I'm like, I don't expect, I don't expect Canadians across the board to have that insane drive like me because I've done so much difficult shit. I know it's like, okay, I'm going to be able to do this. But most Canadians have lived their 9 to 5, expecting things to get better, and things don't get better. They don't respond with more motivation. They just respond with, let me clam up, let me put my head in the sand and see if I can just weather the storm. So, oh man, it's just so crazy to see like the choices of the previous generations are affecting us now, guys. If you're a millennial and you're watching this, the choices of the previous generations have affected your circumstances. You need to respond to that. If you are a young person watching this, the choices of the couple generations back are affecting you profoundly. Go to chatgpt.com now and learn stuff. Learn some tech stuff now. If you're an older person and you're watching this, you need to look at the young people around you and see how difficult their lives are. And you need to really, really appreciate what you have. Like you might be the only generation to experience the life that you have right now, because all the generations after this are going to face nightmarishly difficult conditions. And I have to be frank and candid in talking to the three age groups: young people, adults, older people, just because if we don't acknowledge this reality that we're in, we're quite literally going to be spinning in circles forever. I had to acknowledge profoundly difficult realities for myself in order to make extreme changes. And those changes led to a better path for me. And I think Canada sort of needs to make the same decisions in a way that's going to lead to a better path for everyone. And it's going to be hard to do. So let me see how much I'm going to go through the economic and social factors here. Um, and then I think I might do a part 2 for this one because this one's going to be pretty long. But let's just get into the more of the social factors, economic factors that Daniel's got in his research here.
Is women's education and career opportunities. Empowerment of women has been a major.
Hold on.
The next insecure
I
they
just did another video on women in the world of AI and getting jobs. So I'm curious to see what he's saying here.
often postpone or limit their decision to grow their family. The next layer on this is women's education and career opportunities. Empowerment of women has been a major driver of the birth rate decline, and largely a positive one. As societies develop, women gain greater access to higher education and careers, along with reproductive autonomy through birth control. With more opportunities, women tend to marry later and have children later and in fewer numbers. In Canada and most wealthy nations, generations of women have understandably prioritized establishing their careers and personal goals before starting family. And research states that when they have control over their lives, they generally choose to have fewer children. This is evident around the world. Higher female education and labor participation are strongly linked to lower birth rates. In that respect, it is an outcome of women's progress, which would be characterized as a societal success, even if it contributes to changes in demographic structure. Related to this is that people are forming families later in life. Marriage rates have declined. The average age of first marriage and first childbirth has risen.
So ladies have been empowered to the point where they're just looking at having families and like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a career. Like my mother is a career woman, and doing both extremely difficult, guys. To be a doting mother and have a career over your kids, or be a doting mother and have a career that you can say, I'm a higher achiever. It's extremely hard, guys. Like, let's get really serious. Am I going to blame the population decline on women achieving a higher education? No. I mean, I really, I really appreciate when women are highly educated. Like, let's get really serious. Like, yes, but it's I don't think it would be to this particular degree that you know birth rates would decline. I think if we lived in a society where housing was relatively affordable and women were uh, highly educated, there would still be families. Like my mother says this all the time. When she hit 35, I think she had me when she was 35, 38. Like it was later in life. I was a geriatric pregnancy or whatever. But there was something in her body telling her she wants to have babies right now. Like it was time to have babies. So it's I really do believe and rely on the bioprogramming of humans. Like I have AI agents built, so their programming and drive and intent is quite literally determined by what our team wants it to be. And I think that human beings, we do have some sort of like chemical fail safes in us that say, women, when they get to a certain age, they want to have kids. Guys, when they get to a certain age, all they want to do is save their money. It's there's some programming in us somewhere that wants us to do that. But when you got, and I believe all animals really have this. But in the animal kingdom, animals, they can build their own homes. They can dig a hole underground, live there, find a cave. Like it's easy to find shelter when you're an animal. When you're a human being, you might want to have kids, but finding shelter when houses cost $1 million and you can barely afford to save a couple $100s a month, it's impossible. So housing, it is, I believe, the quintessential reason why birth rates are declining. But of course, there are other contributing factors like higher education of women. When given the choice, women just opt to not have kids a lot of the time. But still, like even career women, at some point they say, "Oh, I wish I had a kid," or "I want a kid." A lot of the times, so I do believe it is housing. Housing has a lot to do with it. If more people had availability for houses where they can grow kids, and those kids can be nurtured in a good space, more people would have families. 100%.
Canada. The typical Canadian parent is now several years older than they were in the past decade. A lot of this is just an economic thing. It takes longer to feel comfortable in your career, to feel financially secure, to build enough assets that you feel like you have a safety net. As somebody who's a parent myself, I feel like you never really feel ready. But by the time the careers are established, a couple feels ready for kids, planning, timing, etc., leaves less runway for them to try to have kids. If you decide to start a family at 35 instead of 25, like your parents' generation might have, it would result in less time for you to try and do that. Most people have a number in their head at which, oh, that's the latest I would maybe want to have kids. And many young people spend more years single or in uncommitted relationships, which would also push your decision to do parenthood later. Another often overlooked reason for lower birth rates is the success in reducing unintended pregnancies, especially among teenagers and young adults. So, family planning and fewer unplanned pregnancies. In the past, a significant share of births were unplanned. For example, teen pregnancies during the mid 20th century would have contributed to higher fertility rates. Today, however, teen birth rates have plummeted. And so this demographer actually stated that the decline in birth rates has been driven primarily by fewer births in their teens and early 20s. And these births are ones that are very often unintended. In other words, because we've progressed as a society, more people are able to plan their childbearing, waiting until they truly want a child, which typically leads to having fewer, or what individuals would deem as a sustainable amount for them or for the social structure to have. And again, from a social structure, these are all positive developments. Fewer unplanned teen pregnancies is a win. However, these things do lower the overall number of births. And I guess one of the reasons that I think it's interesting to discuss this is because I don't know if I'm fully convinced that us having this like big drop in the population is actually necessarily this catastrophic thing. I
I
think
don't
that
think
it
that either.
just is, it doesn't fit the system that we've intended to build. Again, we've built this, you don't even have to call it capitalism. We've built some sort of market system that requires more participants, more capital, which is why we print money and we try and have more people chasing goods. And my question is, what's actually so wrong with having fewer people? In Japan, a lot of people look at their way of life and say, wow, it's an extraordinary high quality of life. Why are we trying so hard to have more people and more money chasing fewer things? Is it because our economic system depends on scarcity rather than abundance? The other thing that often gets blamed for this is just a general changing social norm and personal priorities. There's evidence that a cultural shift is underway in how people view family and parenthood. In modern Canada, having a large family is no longer seen as the default life path. And this is true very much for much of the Western world. It's just one of many choices that people make, and it's increasingly an uncommon one. Many adults today place greater emphasis on personal fulfillment, career, travel, and other experiences, and they feel less pressure to have children than previous generations did. Researchers stated that this recent decline in birth rate reflects a reordering of adult priorities. Parenthood now plays a diminished role in many people's life plans. Continuing a little bit further on this shift, broad cultural and normative changes, for example, declining religious observance. Religious communities historically encourage larger families. So as society becomes more secular, that influence wanes a little bit. The influence of peers and media, seeing more friends remain child-free or having one kid normalizes that choice. And then it
You
becomes
know, it's
this
funny.
self-reinforcing.
That's so funny he says that, because like there was I saw this other video about declining birth rates in the States, and there was a girl talking about how if Taylor Swift had a kid, that would spawn the birth of millions of babies in America because women love Taylor Swift so much, and they're doing what she does, and they want to be like just like her or whatever. And so, and because of social media, I believe social media has got a big part to play in this as well. If you're a young person, you're going on social media, you're seeing all these people have this amazing time, amazing life, because literally all social media is the best of the best of the best of what humans are experiencing, like leisurely wise, and then you put it in one place. It's a cesspool of delusion sometimes, just because you're looking at a feed of just like jets and cars and all the great shit in life, but not the actual stuff that it takes to get those things. No one likes that stuff, guys. You know why? You know why no one likes? You know how I know no one likes to know about the stuff that gets you all the cool stuff? Because we post that stuff on YouTube. No one gives a shit. So it's really interesting to see, during a time when women are becoming more educated, making more um, reserved choices on having children. At the same time as social media is showing everyone a life of just like, it's all about me, it's all about me. I need to be the best I can in my life. I need to experience the best life. I need to have fun. I need to feel good. It's all like, it's all about the person, the individual now. It's not really about families. Like, our families don't have social media profiles. We individually have social media profiles. So it's interesting to, someone should do that. Someone should make a social media platform that is just like, this is my family. This is the family unit, and it's not so individual. Like, you communicate with family. I think more families would probably be born that way. I don't know. Maybe social media is we're missing a platform. But when we as a species are looking at everyone else, online, or the people who post online succeed individually, we sort of take on that individualistic sentiment, and that it all has to be for us. And I can tell you right now, like someone who doesn't use social media for anything other than like showing you guys about AI and what's going on in the economy, uh, all that individualistic shit, like you're gonna very quickly learn, like once you start a business and you have to look after the interests of others, like this stuff, like a lot of it doesn't matter one bit, guys. Like all this, like I need my pictures or my hair to look a certain way. Look at my fucking face right now.
cycle when most people around you have smaller families. Having a big family feels unusual, and this lower or smaller family norm perpetuates itself. All of these factors combine to cultivate an environment where having zero or one child is increasingly common and socially acceptable, contributing to the lower birth rates that we're seeing very much in the Western world. Again, no judgment. I think that people should be free to do whatever they want and have however many kids they want. Probably if you don't want to have kids, then you wouldn't be a good candidate to have kids, because it is very much, in my experience, something that you have to want to do to enjoy it and to do a good job at it.
Yeah.
On top of this, and
right.
around the idea of cost of this idea of work-life balance and intensive parenting. Modern parenting can be intense and demanding, and many prospective parents worry about balancing it with work, right? In today's economy, households often need two incomes or want two incomes, but having kids, especially for young children, is practically a full-time job in itself. And without ample support, this trade-off between career and family can be daunting for many people. Working long hours, limited maternity and paternity leave, costly or inaccessible childcare. These are all practical barriers that lead some people to delay or forgo having kids. Even with family-friendly policies or countries that really encourage it through their policies, it's challenging. And studies find that while measures like paid parental leave, subsidized daycare, or child benefits do encourage people to have slightly more children, the effect tends to be modest or close to unmeasurable. Parents also face societal pressure to be ever attentive and spend lots of time and resources on each child, which can make the process of parenting more stressful and expensive than it used to be. All of this means that some individuals or couples feel they can realistically handle fewer children, given career, mental health considerations, and the result is smaller families, even among those who do want to have families but struggle to reconcile it with other responsibilities or especially costs. The last piece that I'll add that's been floated is these like broader social anxieties, political instability, climate uncertainties about the future of the world. It plays a role for some individuals where they don't know if this is like the type of world they want to bring kids into. However, when compared with the economic and cultural factors I mentioned before, these tend to only contribute in a very small way based on the overall birth rate. So to summarize, no single reason can fully explain why Canadians are having far fewer kids. It's a combination of housing costs, higher costs in general, shifting lifestyles, and new norms about family that together push family sizes down. Many of these changes, greater gender equality, more control over reproduction, better career opportunities, etc., are positive even as they coincide with fewer births. And this idea of fewer births,
He meant all of what he just mentioned there was specifically for women. If you're a man, if you're a man and you've lived the past 2 decades, 100%, like if you're a white man, sorry, white bros, but your opportunities like have been significantly reduced. because of the thrust of opportunities being pushed towards women, people of color. It's funny, like that's this even the people of color part. I never ever in my life felt like I got a leg up because I had color in my skin. Not once. If anything, I felt the opposite. But you power through. But I could 100% believe women were thrust forward with opportunities like at every turn. Like it was. I worked in a women's college hospital. Like the hospital was Women's College Hospital, Sunnybrook Health Science Center, was extremely focused on women. Like it was all women, 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 women. And it's funny because I think women have been boosted to. I mean, obviously, there's women don't have perfect lives. I don't think anyone has a perfect life, but I can certainly say that the lives of women in Western society have improved significantly over the past few decades, to the point where we sort of have to look at guys and be like, "Hey, can we do anything for the bros?" Because men are. I don't know if I can say these words on YouTube. What do these guys say when they say men are deleting themselves? Men are erasing themselves from existence faster than ever before. So hopefully someone can like chime up and say, "Hey guys, like we still care about men sometimes." Like I don't know if that'll ever. I don't think so. I think men will always be that what is it? I don't want to say disposable, but expendable resource in society. Like men go to war, die by the billions. There's not been a war or any sort of conflict globally that has resulted in billions of women dying. And I doubt that will ever happen. Like if you have men going to war, they're not going to even women that belong to the enemy. You're not going to hurt the women. Women have inherent value because women can have kids, and men understand that. So men, our value is really born from what we do. We build stuff, break stuff. How can we stack money higher? So really, like, I don't ever think men are going to get, supported for, more jobs or more education or any shit like that. Men quite literally built the world that we live in. So we're not going to turn around and say, "Hey, do you need any help, buddy?" It's going to be more like, well, men are going to continue building the world. So up until the point where women, started to harness a lot of power, kids are being born. Families are growing, kids are being born into the world. And as soon as women got the opportunity and choice, they're like, "Okay, stop, turn off all the taps. If I can't get a big house, if I can't, get best conditions possible, no kids." So unless we return to a point where, or get to a point where educated women are saying, "Okay, great, we have the resources, the space to have kids willy nilly." Like I've even heard from women, Toronto, they have no plans of having kids whatsoever. And I think a lot of that has to do with the availability of housing, the availability of resources that's just not there. It's not making them comfortable enough to have kids willy nilly, because they do need a woman having a child. I personally believe, hey, I could be wrong. Who knows? I personally believe when a woman's having a child, she needs support. We even see this in animals. Like it's the bottom line. She's carrying a very delicate being inside of her. She needs support. I mean, if I sound like a misogynist for that, I don't know what to say anymore, guys. We live in a different world now, but then that's where the support for women is born, because they're having kids and they need support to, have kids and have a career. But if women stop having kids and they're just still getting support and all the benefits of like, "Hey, we know you have to have kids. We're gonna support you, but oh, well, by the way, you're not having kids anymore. Do we need to support you anymore?" It's going to be a hard conversation that we're going to start having. One example that I always hear, and I heard this from a guy who was like in the health or the homeless shelter networks in Canada, in Toronto. He worked in the homeless shelter networks, and he said there's no like homeless shelter for men. There's no like there's no shelters like, "Hey, it's a men's shelter." Maybe like one or one off. Generally, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of shelters for women. I've personally volunteered in shelters for women. Like, they'll bring in their kids, um, get food. Like, I would even like serve them food. I did all that stuff when I was younger to volunteer work. You guys should do that stuff. It'll give you good perspective. But it was generally all to support women, and especially women who had abusive relationship, or they had children or whatever. And there's hundreds of those around. And as women were getting more support for their career and all that stuff, the shelters, they didn't reduce in the number or amount. Men's shelters didn't increase. So it's hard to say, guys, but I really don't think, unless there's a sudden burst of like super successful men who can just buy a whole bunch of houses and have a whole bunch of resources readily available, a lot of these women who have achieved success are just simply not going to have kids. That's the bottom line. Because I don't see, like, in my life, I can say that my parents are an exception. My mom was a breadwinner in our family. My dad still made money. He did a lot of work, but you don't see many women who are the breadwinners of their family. Like, that's a common thing. They usually, women tend towards going for partners, at least in my experience. Guys, this is all my experience. They tend to go for partners who have a better situation than them, because they want to have a better situation to have a kid. They don't tend to go and have a worse situation, because that would imply, like, well, what's the reason to even have a partner if my situation is going to get worse? And that's why I believe that men, when we're looked at through the lens of society, like, we don't have the support groups or whatever. If anyone talks about a men's support group, they're borderline like misogyny or whatever. It sucks. And I saw this other guy, Scott Galloway, talking about the same thing. I think that's his name. But we sort of have to pay attention to this stuff. Like, women are the bearers of life in reality, in our world. And it's gonna be down to their decisions on whether or not kids are being born. And there just doesn't look to be the conditions or sentiment in these developed nations for women to want to have kids. you know so I mean, this it's such a hard conversation to have, because there are so many factors involved. I'm going to let me see, let's just finish off these economic and social factors. I'm going to try and get a part 2 on this video at some point. But it's just so interesting especially from my perspective, just being a man growing up in Canada. um it's just so interesting to see how we got here. And we literally, you can't, it's hard to point blame at people for this type of situation. The only things that we can really do is try and make it better in the best ways we know how. And you know we don't want to take what we've given to people away so that they start having kids. And we don't want to give stuff to people so that they can start having kids. We need to find a way where, in the situations we have now, can we figure out what's the best course of action. And honestly, at this point in time, like, as an AI person, my vision for what's coming down the pipe is, very few children, very few children in the next 10, 20 years. It's an oddity to see pregnant women downtown Toronto now. If you see, I barely see children. It's an oddity to see them. I believe we're going to get to a world where, if you have a young child, like, you're going to be like a rare family. Like, wow, you have a kid. It reminds me of that movie, uh, with, I can't remember the name, but it was basically it was a world where no more kids were being born. And, like, if you were a young person in the world, like, you were a celebrity or whatever. Like, the youngest person in the world got assassinated. It was like a big thing. Um, I can't remember what the name of the movie was, but it was a great movie. And I see a world. It's not obviously as dystopian as that, but it's just going to be a lot of adults, and a lot of AI robots, because they're not going to have any young people to do work. So let's finish up the rest of this video. Try and keep it under an hour. I might do a part 2, but amazing research from Daniel. Sorry about the freeze frame there, buddy. But we're headed into some extremely uncertain times, and adults in Canada, men, women, we're gonna have to start making some important decisions.
Versus often positioned as a negative thing. I see a lot of people mention it as if it's like this really bad thing. And I just don't know what data they're using. Nobody's really explained to me, why is it such a bad thing? If we have a fixed amount of resources on Earth, would it not actually be better to have fewer people consuming those resources so that each person gets more, so that your per capita quality of life improves? If people are communicating that they don't actually want to have more children. And we have seen like huge increases and decreases in birth rates historically as well. And there have been huge periods where population has declined massively. I think like during the bubonic plague, for example, 50% of Europe's population passed away. The key challenge is that people's desired family size often isn't being realized. I think that's where it becomes a negative thing. Surveys have found that people report wanting more children on average than they actually end up having. This gap would suggest that there are obstacles or deterrents like affordability or housing or inadequate support or a society that doesn't make it possible for this to happen, that keeps would-be parents from achieving their ideal families. So why does this actually matter? Smaller families.
So he's gonna go into the policies and future outlook. I'm gonna cut it short here. I'll try and get the other part two up at some point, but it's crazy to see this stuff play out at a time when I'm old enough to understand it, but young enough for it to literally directly affect me. And as an AI person looking at digital beings enter our world, our workforce, soak up income and revenue that would have otherwise gone to a human to start a family. It's just like we have to sort of acknowledge the inevitable here. People are having less humans. Humans are building more robots. At some point in time, like our population is going to continue to decrease until we get to a point where it's like, okay, wow, we have all this space, we have all this resources. Let's start having kids again. I don't know when that's going to be. But certainly in my lifetime, there's going to be a lot fewer kids being born to families in Western society versus than when my parents were growing up. So, you know, I'm excited because hey, we're going to be able to build more automations, do a whole bunch of work. There's not going to be any people to work, great. But at the same time, it's like there's not going to be any new people, and there's not going to be any young upstarts trying to cure cancer or solve the energy crisis or find a way to slow down starvation in impoverished nations. Like we need people to be born so that they can carve out history. We literally need new geniuses, new legendary humans to be born so that they can make changes to the world. Because the people who exist right now, clearly, now you too, we're not doing it. It's not working for us. So I'm looking forward to a change. I'm hoping to God that there's some kid somewhere born that can solve a lot of these issues. Be it politics, science, something like that. But man, I really it's an exciting and scary time to be alive. But I'm not. You can't be afraid. You can't be afraid of this stuff, guys. You have to grip it and rip it. Embrace this challenge that our timeline has given us, and try to harness your own power to make your own way. So, if you like this type of conversation, Daniel, like kudos to you, brother. You did some amazing amounts of research here. If you like this type of conversation, hit like and subscribe. If you don't like this conversation, if you don't like anything that Daniel said, that I said, feel free to comment. Let us know. When it comes to birth rates and like relationships and stuff like that, I know it gets really spicy. So if you guys have your 2 cents, you want to leave that 100%. We're going to read all the comments at the end of the year, round them up. But I really do feel like this conversation is heating up. Like we're getting more subscribers, more likes every day, and hopefully, we can all land on a narrative that makes sense for Canadians, and we can grow our circumstances to something sustainable and something that people can wake up and say, "Hey, I'm looking forward to living in Canada today. I'm looking forward to working towards my goals." Because right now we don't have that, and we need that. Looking forward to the next one. Bye now.